Hey, it's Nathan. Before we start, I want you to think about something. Most people believe violence is loud. They picture shouting, chaos, broken glass. But the most dangerous men I've ever read about are quiet. They don't posture. They don't threaten. They document. They wait. And when they finally move, it's already over. Tonight's story is about one of those men. Kieran Redmond spent 22 years in a unit that doesn't hand out patches or parades. The men who got sent when there was no one else left to send. Then he came home, climbed trees for a living, and raised his boy. And then a bare-knuckle fighter who had never lost a bout in his life put that boy on a ventilator and went out drinking to celebrate. His friends filmed it. Kieran watched the video exactly once. What happened in the 4 minutes after he stepped into that alley? And what happened at midnight when 6 men with baseball bats showed up at his farmhouse is one of the most surgical stories of consequences I've ever told on this channel. Stay with me, because the ending doesn't just close a case, it closes an entire industry. Let's get into it. The first thing anyone in Stavely, Pennsylvania could tell you about Kieran Redmond was that he was patient. They watched him hang 90 feet up in a dying red oak over the Lutheran church, taking the tree down one limb at a time, each cut roped and counterweighted so that a 2-ton branch touched the grass like it was being set down by hand. Lockwood jobs took him days when other crews promised hours, and nothing he dropped ever broke so much as a flower pot. What nobody in Stavely could tell you was where that patience came from, because the 22 years before Kieran bought his rigging truck existed only as a folded flag's worth of paperwork and a pension routed through 3 different offices. He had spent those years in a unit with no name that stuck, doing recoveries and removals in places the news never mentioned, and he had been, by the private arithmetic of the men who tasked him, the last call. When a hostage was written off, when a team went dark, when every clean option had failed, someone picked up a phone, and Kieran went. He had come home at 44 with steady hands, a bad shoulder, and a rule he repeated to himself like a prayer. The loud man is performing. The quiet man is working. He married Janelle Dorset the year he got out. She was warm and restless, and she had married the calm of him without understanding that the calm had a basement. When their son Jude was born, Kieran wept in a hospital hallway for the first time in his adult life. The marriage lasted 6 years. Janelle didn't leave because of another man. She left because Kieran's silences felt like locked doors, and she wanted a life that made noise. The divorce was civil. They split custody down the middle, and every other week Jude, a small, careful 8-year-old who sorted his baseball cards by team and then by smile, lived in the farmhouse Kieran had rebuilt board by board on 11 acres of timber at the edge of town. It was Jude who told his father, one Sunday in the truck, that Mom had a new boyfriend. It was Jude who added, quietly, looking out the window, that the boyfriend's hands were very big. The boyfriend's name was Rocco Vetter, and in 3 counties you didn't have to explain who that was. 31 fights, 31 wins, none of them in a cage with a referee. Rocco was the king of an underground circuit that ran out of barns and warehouse floors on Friday nights. Bare knuckles, folding money, no gloves, no doctors. He was 6'4" with hands like cinder blocks and a smile he wore the way other men wore cologne. In public he was charming. He coached kids wrestling on Saturdays, bought rounds at the brass rail, and let old men squeeze his forearm at the diner. The circuit's promoter, a soft-spoken money man named Monte Greaves, had built an empire on that smile. Greaves ran the betting, 6 figures a night, streamed on burner links to gamblers in 4 states, and Rocco was his undefeated product, his walking jackpot. What the public didn't see, Kieran started cataloging within a month. He noticed the way Janelle's laugh had gotten faster, the way she checked Rocco's face before she answered a question. He noticed that Jude had stopped talking about his weeks at Mom's. Then in April, Jude came back with a bruise on his upper arm in the shape of a grip. Growing boy's bruise, Janelle said on the phone. He fell off the trampoline, and Rocco had actually been the one to ice it. Kieran said nothing. Saying something was performing. Instead, he did what he had done for 22 years in worse places. He documented. Photographs. Dated. A notebook. A quiet call to a family lawyer named Sylvia Grange, who told him honestly that a bruise and a feeling would lose in court, that mothers keep custody, and that if he wanted the schedule changed, he needed a pattern, a witness, or a miracle. So Kieran built the pattern file and waited, and hated himself for waiting. And every other Friday he drove his son back to a house where the doors were now answered by a man who had never lost. The miracle came in the worst possible shape. On the second Friday in June, Janelle pulled a double shift at the medical billing office, and Rocco kept Jude, the first time it had ever been just the two of them. What happened in that living room was later reconstructed frame by frame, because Rocco's friends filmed most of it. Rocco had been drinking since 5, celebrating. Greaves had just booked him a title bout against a Baltimore fighter, the biggest handle of Greaves's career. Rocco decided the skinny, quiet kid in his house needed toughening up, and he called it a game. Body shots. Hands down, chin up, take it like a champ. On the video, 6 grown men are laughing. Ty Gorman is holding the phone. Mitch Hurd is saying lighter, lighter, and laughing anyway. And Rocco, 31 and 0, 240 pounds, is snapping punches into the ribs and stomach of an 8-year-old boy who keeps getting up because his whole short life he has been told to be brave. The last blow on the video is not light. Jude goes down and does not get up, and someone says he's faking, and the camera stops. They put the boy on the couch, and then, this is the part the county never forgave, they went out. All 7 of them, to the brass rail, to toast the title fight. Freddie Vint, the youngest of the crew, drunk and giddy, posted the clip to their private group chat with 3 laughing emojis. Janelle came home at 11 to a son she could not wake. The surgeons at St. Anselm found the ruptured spleen and the bleeding, swelling brain, and by 2 in the morning Jude Redmond was in the pediatric ICU with a machine breathing for him. Dr. Farida Noor made the phone calls herself. Kieran was 60 feet up a storm-split maple at dawn, working a chainsaw on a rope bridge of his own design, when his phone buzzed against his chest, and buzzed, and buzzed. He came down the trunk like weather. In the ICU waiting room, Janelle, shaking, unable to look at him, handed over her phone, because by then, Vince's clip had leaked out of the group chat, and someone with a conscience had sent it to her. Kieran watched the video of his son's beating exactly once, all the way through, without moving. Then he handed the phone back, kissed his unconscious son on the forehead, memorized the number on the ventilator's display, and walked out of the hospital into the summer dark. He did not drive fast. He drove the speed limit to the brass rail, parked under the streetlight, and spent 4 minutes doing what he had always done before a removal. He studied the ground. The bar's back door opened onto an alley with a dumpster, a delivery ramp, and, Kieran noted, a security camera over the loading door with a clean, wide angle. That mattered. He wanted an unblinking witness. He wanted the record to show who swung first. He walked in the front, and the noise died the way it does when the weather changes. Rocco was at the rail with his 6, mid-toast. Kieran didn't shout. He said one sentence, outside, or I say what you did in front of everyone, and walked out the back. Pride is a leash, and Rocco came out on it, rolling his shoulders and grinning for his boys, who crowded the doorway to watch their king put down the X. Rocco even glanced up at the camera. He wanted a copy. What the camera recorded became, in slow motion, a kind of local scripture. Rocco throws first, a huge, looping right, the punch that had ended 31 nights. Kieran isn't there when it lands. What follows is 4 minutes long, and it is not a fight, because a fight is a contest between 2 people playing the same sport, and only one man in that alley had ever done violence for a living without an audience. Kieran broke the tools first. The right hand that had hit his son, then the left, the metacarpals, methodically, against the dumpster's steel edge, the way you dull a blade you never wanted sharpened again. When Rocco tried to wrestle, Kieran took his base, a knee, then the opposite ankle, driven wrong under 240 pounds of falling man. By the 4th minute, the undefeated king of 3 counties was on his back on the concrete, hands and legs ruined, begging, actually begging. The camera caught the shapes his mouth made, and his 6 friends stood frozen in the doorway, because every animal knows the difference between a fighter and a predator. Kieran leaned down and said something the camera couldn't hear, that Rocco would later repeat to a nurse. You put a little boy on a ventilator and went drinking. Tell the machine to be brave. Then Kieran stepped back, took out his phone, and called 911 on himself. He requested 2 ambulances, one for Rocco and one on standby for anyone at the door who felt like avenging him. And then he stood under the camera, hands visible, and waited. Detective Greta Salzman had worked Stavely for 11 years and had never seen an assault scene where the man who did it preserved it. Kieran gave his statement in complete sentences. The video of Jude's beating, the sentence at the bar, the first punch that wasn't his. The camera backed every word. Rocco went to St. Anselm, to the same ICU floor as the boy, 2 doors down, which the nurses noticed and did not hurry to change. With both hands shattered, a knee and an ankle gone, and ribs that had found the ramp's edge. Kieran spent one night in the county lockup, silent, and by morning, 3 things had happened. The alley footage had reached the district attorney, and it plainly showed Rocco initiating. Vince's clip of Jude had gone from a group chat to the whole county's phones, and the town's love for its champion curdled in a single day. The diner took his photo off the wall by noon. And Freddie Vint himself, 23 years old and sick with what he'd filmed and posted, walked into the station with his phone and his passcode and gave Salzman everything. The video, the chat, and, because the chat was where the crew lived, 8 months of messages about Monty Greaves's circuit, the betting handles, the fights Greaves had ordered shortened or stretched for the money. Salzman read for an hour and then made a phone call of her own, because some of those names were already on a whiteboard 90 miles away. The whiteboard belonged to a federal racketeering task force, and the agent who ran it, Idris Cantrell, had spent 14 months circling Greaves's operation without a way in. Cantrell had one other qualification for this particular case. 20 years earlier, in a valley that officially doesn't exist, he had been the voice on the radio the night the last call went out, and Kieran Redmond had been the man who answered it and carried him down a mountain with a leg full of shrapnel. When Cantrell saw the name in Salzman's report, he booked a car to Stavely, and he told his team the thing he would later tell a courtroom. The safest place in this case is anywhere that man's son isn't. The DA released Kieran pending review, and quietly signaled that no jury in the state would convict the alley as anything but self-defense. But Monty Greaves had a different ledger to balance. The Baltimore title fight, the biggest handle of his life, money already moved, markers already sold to men worse than himself, had died in that alley with Rocco's hands. Greaves owed sums that could not be apologized for, to people who did not accept apologies, and the only story that kept him alive was that the man who broke his jackpot would be made an example of. He didn't send strangers. He didn't have to. He had Rocco's crew, 6 men marinating in humiliation, their king begging on camera, their names attached to a video of a beaten child, their town crossing the street to avoid them. Greaves put $20,000 on the table of the gym's back office and told them to make it look like rage, not business. Bats, not guns. Guns brought federal time. Kieran knew they were coming before they did. He had spent a week noticing what the town hadn't. The same gray pickup rolling past the farmhouse twice a day. Mitch Hurd's cousin photographing the driveway from the road. The silence from the gym like held breath. He moved his mother to her sister's in Harrisburg. He called Salzman and told her, without drama, that men would be coming to his home, and that he would be there, and that she should keep her phone loud. Salzman offered a patrol car. Kieran declined it. Then he spent 2 days in his own trees. And this is the part of the story that Stavely still tells wrong in every bar, because what he built in that yard was not traps from a movie. It was rigging. It was his trade. Lines and counterweights, lights and angles, a work site, prepared by the most careful rigger in the county, for a job with a 6-man crew arriving at midnight. They came at 12:04 on a moonless Thursday. 2 trucks with the plates taped over, 6 men, 6 aluminum bats, and a gallon of gasoline that was Gorman's own improvisation. They cut the power at the pole box first, which they had scouted, and which Kieran had counted on. The house went dark, and every camera they knew about died, except the 4 they didn't, running on batteries in the tree line, filming in infrared. His 911 call was already live. He had dialed as the trucks turned in, set the phone on the porch rail, and stepped off into the dark. What the 6 men walked into was later diagrammed on a federal exhibit board, but the truth of it was simpler than the diagram. They entered a stranger's dark, and the dark was where Kieran Redmond had lived for 22 years. A floodlight bank fired at the 3rd fence post and blinded them 90 seconds in. A drift of smooth logs, each one roped, weighted, and released like a limb being lowered, took the legs out from the first two men before they understood the yard itself was moving. Gorman, running blind with his gasoline, found a lowered bough at shin height and met the ground so hard he left the can behind. One by one, in the noise and the dark, they were separated the way a crew separates a canopy. A hand on the collar from nowhere, a joint bent the direction joints don't go, a face in the mud, and a zip tie. Kieran went through 6 armed men in under 11 minutes and did not kill anyone, which Cantrell would later call the most disciplined thing about the entire case. When Salzman's units rolled up the drive at 12:19, headlights washing the lawn, they found 6 men cable-tied in a neat row against the barn, like inventory, bats stacked 10 feet away, gasoline can bagged in plastic. Evidence handling, Salzman noted, better than some of her rookies, and Kieran Redmond sitting on his porch steps in the dark, waiting, with his hands where officers could see them. Every second of the invasion, the bats, the gas, herds shouted promise to burn the kids' treehouse too, was on infrared, and on the open 911 line, time-stamped, admissible, airtight. The 6 phones seized on Kieran's lawn that night broke Monty Greaves's world open like an egg. The 20,000 was there, photographed on the gym desk. The instruction, his rage, not our business, was there, verbatim. And beneath the plot, months deep, was the whole circuit, the handles, the burner streams, the fixed rounds, the bribed deputy in the next county, and one thread from 2019 about a fighter named Silva who had gone into a barn in Maricotte County and never come out, whose family had been told he moved to Florida. Cantrell's task force executed 9 warrants in one gray dawn. Greaves was arrested at his lake house with 4 phones and a bag packed for Montreal. The arrest photo, Greaves in silk pajamas, face down on his own dock, ran statewide. Rocco Vetter woke from his second surgery to find a federal agent seated at his bedside and his own greatest hits playing on a laptop, not his fights, his living room. The video Gorman shot had a sound Rocco had forgotten, his own voice, laughing, saying take it like a champ to a child going down for the last time. Rocco Vetter, who had never lost, learned what losing actually was. It was a prosecutor reading the charges, aggravated assault of a minor, endangering the welfare of a child, and, once Greaves's ledger gave up his cut of the fixed rounds, racketeering, while both his hands lay in casts on the blanket, never to make a fist again. Down the hall, on the 14th day, Jude Redmond opened his eyes. Kieran was in the chair he had not really left, and the first thing his son saw was his father, and the first thing his father said was the thing he'd said at the bottom of every tree. I've got the rope, you just climb. The extubation, Dr. Noor told the family, went as well as she had ever seen. The grand jury took 90 minutes to no-bill Kieran on the alley, and the DA never even presented the farmhouse. The state's official position, read aloud on the courthouse steps, was that Mr. Redmond had lawfully defended his life in his home against an armed, paid invasion. Janelle sat in the back row of every hearing. She had not been in the living room that night, and the county decided she hadn't known, but she had chosen the smile and missed the hands, and she would carry that longer than any sentence. She signed over primary custody without a fight, took the supervised schedule Grange drafted, and became, at the end, the prosecution's cleanest witness against the man she'd almost married. The reckonings came down through the fall like the limbs of a condemned tree, one clean cut at a time. Rocco Vetter pleaded guilty when his lawyer saw the jury pool's faces during selection, and took 18 years. The judge, sentencing him, said she had rarely seen a defendant whose own celebration was the state's best exhibit. Monty Greaves went to trial, lost on every count. The racketeering, the fixes, the $20,000 of hired rage, and drew 24 years federal. The Silva thread from 2019 stayed open, with Greaves now the named subject and no statute of limitations waiting on him. The 6 took pleas between 4 and 9 years, home invasion and conspiracy, and Freddie Vint, who had filmed the worst night of his life and then handed it to the law, served 11 months and testified 3 times. Kieran, asked by a reporter if he hated the kid, said the only merciful sentence of his public life, he's the one who called it what it was. The circuit itself, the barns, the burner links, the Friday night money, evaporated. 4 counties' worth of gamblers found their names in discovery, including 2 school board members and a deacon. and Stavely spent a satisfying month reading the paper. Kieran never gave the interviews. He went back up the trees. But that winter, anyone driving past the farmhouse could see the new thing he was building on his own land, 60 feet up in the biggest white oak in the county, a treehouse with rails and rope ladders and a cantilevered porch, over-engineered the way only one man in Pennsylvania would over-engineer it. Every load path roped, every anchor doubled. Jude designed the flag that flies off it. He is 9 now. He sleeps without the lights on. At his last checkup, Dr. Noor pronounced him, in writing, completely boring, her highest compliment. On the first warm night in the finished treehouse, over sandwiches, Jude asked his father if the men were ever coming back. Kieran looked out at the yard, at the quiet, ordinary, unremarkable dark, and told his son the truth. For 22 years, he said, I was the call nobody wanted to make. Now I'm the first call you make. That's the whole job. Go to sleep. And the boy did. So that's the story of Kieran Redmond, and I want to leave you with what it actually teaches. Because it isn't fight harder. Notice that every single thing that saved Kieran, legally, morally, practically, was decided before anything got loud. He documented the bruise in April, so the court would believe him in June. He picked an alley with a camera because he wanted a witness more than he wanted revenge. He called 911 on himself, twice, before anyone else could frame the story. He prepared his ground and then used the minimum force that ended the threat. 6 armed men, 0 funerals. That's the difference between rage and resolve. Rage wants an audience. Resolve wants a record. Meanwhile, look at the other side. Rocco's entire life was performance. The smile, the streak, the crowd at the rail. And performers need witnesses, which is exactly why his crew filmed everything, and exactly why the evidence that destroyed all 7 of them was evidence they created themselves, laughing. There's a lesson in that for situations far smaller than this one. The person doing wrong will usually hand you the proof, if you're patient enough to let them. And one more thing. The quiet kid who took it like a champ was braver than every grown man in that living room, and the youngest man in that crew, the one who finally told the truth, is the only one who walked out with a life. Courage and conscience, it turns out, are the same muscle. If this story hit you the way it hit me, you know what to do, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Nathan, signing off.